Game one is in the books, and we have more than 30 questions to get to in our Mailbag Friday. So let's dive into that next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you listen to your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener, of course, welcome in. We love new listeners here on the Locked On Podcast Network. And if you want to know a little bit more about me, well, I'm based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, do some producing over there, do some co-hosting, have my own show once a week over there. So I stay pretty busy in the sports world. But when you come to this podcast, you know that you are getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness continues tonight. Crazy games last night in the Sweet 16 and hoping for more craziness in tonight's slate. So be sure to go over to FanDuel, create that account, and start winning some money today and use that code that I'll hand out a little bit later on in today's episode. Well, it is a Friday, and this is a unique Friday because now we've actually begun the 2024 season. I opened it up yesterday right after the game, and we've got more than 30 questions to get into. So for the first time in Locked On Royals history, all three segments are going to be dedicated to questions from the listeners. I don't want to waste any more time. Let's get into it. This first question comes from Christopher. Why is Quatraro still the manager of the Royals? Honestly. Well, guys, I know that opening day is an exciting time for everybody. I know that for a lot of us, the hope was that Cole Reagans was going to go out there and shove, and the Royals were going to dominate Pablo Lopez, and they were going to be 1-0 as I was doing this podcast episode. But last year, I don't really know if you can hold it up to Matt Quatraro and put the blame on Matt Quatraro. I mean, we pointed out the roster flaws they had. I mean, there were 17 new guys to the opening day roster yesterday than there were last year, and double-digit numbers of guys last year aren't even on opening day rosters, let alone the big leagues at this point. I mean, it's not something where I'm willing to judge Matt Quatraro just yet. Now, if we look up in June and the Royals are 30 games under, then we might have a different conversation. But it's one game. I promise you, if they win tomorrow, we're not asking about why Matt Quatraro is the manager of this staff. I didn't really think the moves he made yesterday were detrimental. It was because the Royals offense couldn't score off Pablo Lopez or the Minnesota bullpen, both of whom are very, very good. Question number 2 is from Jerry. Sal's plate appearance. Yes, I do understand Salvador Perez had a very subpar game yesterday. Some bad swings, some ugly swings, pitches that were way out of the zone. But I'm just not going to get caught up in Salvador Perez's plate discipline because he's been the same hitter his entire career. If you are wanting Salvador Perez to lay off those pitches, you are going to be waiting till the end of time. He is in his mid-30s. The hitter he is not going to change. He is not all of a sudden going to be spitting on a lot of those pitches with 2 strikes. Those sliders down in the way from right-handed pitchers, it's not going to work. He is a bad ball hitter, and the Royals have a wild card win in 2014 because he's willing to swing at those pitches. Like, to me, we're getting too caught up and worried about a guy that's been around for more than a decade now. We're coming up on 15 years of Salvador Perez in the big leagues. He's not changing the hitter that he is. Next question comes from DJ. Why was Vinny batting third? He's coming off an injury where he lost major time, and to put him in the 3-hole didn't help 4 and 5 hole at all. The decision was mindless. No, Vinny Pasquantino has been projected to be the 3-hole hitter for the Royals all spring. And I firmly believe that once he gets going, he's the best pure hitter on the team. I'm not going to take one game in a 162-game sample size and think that Vinny Pasquantino is not capable of being in the 3-hole. He takes a lot of walks. He sees a lot of pitches. He's got power. He hits the ball hard. He is great protection, too, for Bobby Witt Jr. The lineup. The top 3 Royals in the lineup are hitting 1, 2, 3. Garcia, Bobby Witt Jr., Vinny Pasquantino. And I'm not going to say that Vinny's struggles hurt Salvador Perez or Melendez It was just a really good pitcher they saw yesterday and two really good bullpen arms they saw. The Royals weren't on it. They didn't look good. They didn't get good looks aside from Maikel Garcia's solo home run. But I'm not into shaking up the lineup. If you don't hit Vinny in the 3-hole, where are you bumping him down to? You want to bump him 5 or 6? I mean, who's the 3-hole hitter then? Who's the 2-hole hitter? If you want to move Bobby Witt Jr. to 3-hole, who's the 2-hole guy? I mean, yesterday there wasn't really anybody that popped to me that deserved to be in the top 3 other than Garcia, Bobby Witt Jr., and Vinny Pasquantino. Vinny's going to be just fine. He's healthy, and he's one of the best hitters on this team. I'm not getting too caught up in one game. C-squared as 7 through 9 is a black hole. You can't win with a third of your lineup that bad. Again, I mean, Kyle Isbell had a hit yesterday. Nelson Velasquez popped 14 home runs at 150 plate appearances last year. If we're going to take a one-game sample size, and believe me, when I opened this mailbag, I knew we were going to have some overreactions. Adam Frazier, Kyle Isbell, and Nelson Velasquez are not an elite bottom-of-the-order bunch. Okay, but you also have Velasquez, who's got 30 home run power. Frazier's been around the league, and Kyle Isbell could be a guy that's a league average hitter. I mean, you look around baseball, who has elite 7 through 9? I honestly do not think it is a black hole at the bottom of the order. I've seen far worse 7 through 9 hitters for the Royals in my time being a fan and covering this team. I didn't really have too much of an issue with that bunch. Frazier had a hit, Isbell had a hit, and Nelson Velasquez had a couple of good plate appearances. Like, if we get to May and June and the struggles are there, I'll hear you out. But I'm not going to make any changes to 7 through 9 while Michael Massey's still working back. And while, Velasquez is experiencing his first full season at the big league level, like, I just don't think we need to have the overreaction there to the 7 through 9. Yesterday, the offensive struggles were because the Royals faced one of the best pitchers in the American League. The offense isn't there yet to hit guys like that. Lopez has always had the Royals number, and it showed yesterday. Next question comes from Steven. Do you think Pasquantino needs to move down in the lineup until he can prove he can drive in runs instead of leaving runners on base? Again, guys, it's one game. It is one game, and I know that we don't want to hear that. And, you're going to be annoyed if I just spill it all that, wow, there's 161 games left. Well, I kind of have to use it for this sort of question, and the question involving switching up the lineup or demoting guys or benching them. It's one game. It's one game against the reigning division champion's best pitcher, the guy with the second best Cy Young odds. Like, I know the game started off well for the offense. Your first hitter in the season pops a home run, but good pitchers adjust to that. Vinny might have been a little overeager, or maybe they were pitching him really well. I am not concerned in the slightest with Vinny Pasquantino. As I said in the earlier question, he is somebody that I believe to be one of the best hitters on this team. I'm not moving him down in the order. And also because who's the 3-hole hitter? It's not MJ. It's not Renfroe. It's not Adam Frazier. It's not Velasquez. It's not Isbell. Who would it be? I'm fine with the top 3 in the Royals lineup right now. I'm just not going to demote a guy after one 0-for-4 performance that he had on opening day. Next question comes from Israel. What do you think of Q's pitching decision? Should he have gone to a higher leverage pitcher? I did question, I'm not going to be lying to anybody here. I questioned the move for Angel Serpa until I went back and saw who was coming up for Minnesota. They wanted Carlos Santana to be hitting from the right side, and they wanted a lefty on lefty with Max Kepler. There are 2 lefties in the Royals bullpen, Serpa, Will Smith. Will Smith is a closer. It was a one-run game. You don't want to burn your closer, of course, in the 8th inning. Chris Stratton, they signed Chris Stratton to be able to pitch in spots like that, and he wasn't good yesterday. I am not going to sugarcoat it. Also, he put himself in a bad spot, but then the runs came across on weird plays. You had the weird non-hit by pitch, pass ball, wild pitch that scored a run and then an infield single. It wasn't like Chris Stratton was getting just demolished all over the yard. Those were guys I would have gone to. Maybe would have thought John Schreiber in the 9th, but again, Chris Stratton has been there. He's been on a World Series team. He's pitched in the playoffs. He's been around. He can pitch in a spot like that. Serpa, it was questioned, but he's the only other lefty in the bullpen. And they wanted Santana to hit from the right side, and they wanted Will Smith to be available if the Royals did take the lead or tie it in the 8th inning. So that's the decision that Q made, and it didn't work out. But also, Chris Stratton's got to be able to lock it down in the spot like that. I have no issue going to Stratton in the 9th. And now that I look back on it, I don't really question the Serpa move because they wanted a lefty, and they didn't want to burn the other lefty who's their closer in the bullpen. Let's answer one more question here. This one's from Bob. If you were pitching to Salvi, would you throw breaking balls low and outside? Thanks, I'll listen off the air. Yeah, I think I would try to get Salvi fishing because if you leave anything in the middle of the zone, he's going to deposit it over the fountains, maybe onto the highway behind Kauffman Stadium. It's a pitch he struggles with, and he always has. But he's also found ways to put balls in play and actually lift those into the outfield grass. So, yeah, if I was a pitcher and I had him down 2 strikes, it's likely where I'm getting out leaning over the plate. And then if he's laying off that or he's still making contact, I'm probably throwing a circle change down at the back right foot, or I'm trying to bust him inside with a fastball in the inside corner. So that would be my approach to pitching Salvador Perez. But this is also a guy who's hit nearly 50 home runs in one season. He's a multiple-time All-Star. He's a Silver Slugger winner. He knows how to hit, guys. He's just an aggressive hitter. And yesterday, it probably frustrated you more than usual because of the expectations set on this baseball club. Okay, we still have 20-plus questions to get to. Let's take a quick break and come back and answer those on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Be sure to give me that follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Before we go any further, let's give a shout out to the title sponsor today in FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, and you can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. And the games are going to be happening here in about 2 hours. Again, I keep doing time references, even though this is going to come out later than when I actually do it. So probably an hour till tip-off by the time this podcast episode comes out, or 30 minutes. And you got to rush over to FanDuel. Go and use our code, create your account, start placing some money on these games, use prop bets, first half over-unders. There's so many opportunities for you to win money, and we strongly encourage you to win that money over at FanDuel today. Get those in before the March Madness Sweet 16 games tip off this evening. Well, we got more questions to dive into in the mailbag segment, so let's start it off here in segment number 2 with KC Sports. Thought that Alex Zumwalt and Drew Saylor philosophy was all about plate discipline and walks as good as a hit, but this team still hacks away like it's the 14 Royals. This franchise has been allergic to walks for 2 generations. I did think that the approach yesterday was poor, and Pablo Lopez had a low pitch count. That was something that I believe factored in to that game late, that when you look up and Pablo Lopez is through 6 and he's got 72 pitches out there, you're not working the count in the way that you should be. Now, the Royals have some aggressive hitters. Maikel Garcia is an aggressive hitter. Bobby Witt Jr. is an aggressive hitter. Salvi's an aggressive hitter. But then you have some different approach guys like Vinny, like MJ. I would even say someone like, well, I don't want to say Nelson Velasquez. He's not there yet. Maybe Adam Frazier. He's a guy that doesn't swing and miss too much. He does put the ball in play. But this is a team that I really do believe just got diced up by a really good arm. Now, tomorrow against Gio Ryan, if they're not walking at all, if they're not seeing any pitches, well, then it is going to open my eyes a little bit of, okay, what are we doing here? I know these are strike throwers, because also you don't want to be passive. If the pitches are in the zone, you got to swing. Or if you can spit on certain pitches, that's all the better for you. But yesterday, I think Pablo Lopez was just on. He had Royals hitters guessing, and it was a bad approach. But like I've said to a number of these questions, I just don't want to overreact to one game to see if this complete philosophy has already failed. Last year, I just don't think there was enough talent in the lineup. This year, let's wait and see a little bit longer than one game if this philosophy is actually going to work or translate to the big league team. Jeff asked, Witt was fine other than swinging. Actually, that was just a comment on Bobby Witt Jr. That's the thing with these mailbags. Sometimes I just have comments and not just questions. This one, it comes from Aiden, so an actual question here. What's your confidence level in this team after today? I felt like we had some hits that just went right to guys and had some bad luck, and Minnesota just kind of everything go their way. I really don't have any wavering confidence so far. Not that I'm super positive and happy about what happened yesterday, but it's one game, everybody. It's one game against a really good baseball team. Of their next 31 games, 18 of them are going to be against teams that were in the playoffs last year. You're going to have a tough schedule. I mean, it's really just the White Sox, to be honest with you, that you're going to get some breathing room with. And you'll see them twice in the next 2 weeks. there are going to be some games that look like yesterday, where the other team is just better than you right now. And there's also going to be games that you get the best of them. I do not think there is a need to either pump up or diminish or be overly negative after one game. It was one game that Minnesota got the best of Kansas City. That's the way it was. It was a 2-1 game until the ninth. It was a very close game. And then Chris Stratton didn't pitch well, and then it was 4-1. Shoulda, woulda, coulda. But that game was close. Those teams were neck and neck. You had an ace, look like an ace, in Cole Reagans. They had an ace, look like an ace, in Pablo Lopez. So my confidence, it's not shot at all. It's one game of 162. Next question comes from Max Salvi. Looks bad at the plate. I expect another hot streak or two over the course of the year. But how long is he hitting fourth? I mean, I think fourth is the best spot for him unless somebody really emerges as a guy that can drive people in. You know, Vinny Pasquantino, Bobby Wood Jr., Michael Garcia, your best three hitters, then 1, 2, 3 in the order. You could interchange them, but I kind of want those top three in the lineup. Then the 4-hole hitter, I mean, if MJ Melendez can drive in runs better than Salvi, then flip him. But then you've got a lefty-lefty problem in the 3-4 hole, unless you move Bobby Wood Jr. down to the 3-hole and Vinny Pasquantino up to the 2-hole, which it wouldn't shock me if that were to happen if Bobby Wood Jr. was driving in runs. But Salvi is a guy that's got 100 RBI seasons, 30 home run seasons, 40 home run seasons. Like I said, one game is not going to make me think differently of Salvador Perez. He was bad yesterday. It was ugly. I do not expect it to be a stretch where he's 0 for his next 35 with 30 strikeouts. As you said, I mean, a hot streak could be coming, and we might feel differently about Salvador Perez in the 4-hole if he looks good tomorrow or on Sunday or in the next series. But again, one game is not going to make me think differently about Salvador Perez and where he falls in the lineup. Next question comes from Ryan. Expected Serpa and Stratton to be more multi-inning relievers versus high-leverage arms. Why do you think Q didn't go with MacArthur or Schreiber in the late innings? Well, you know, it's not so much about wasting those arms. I think they wanted to use MacArthur or Will Smith in a scenario that the game was maybe in the Royals' favor. The Royals had the advantage. They were up by 1 run. They were up by 2 runs, or it was tied. I think that Serpa was the fine move for the lefty situation. We already explained that in one of our other answers. And then I think for James MacArthur, if the game was tied and righties were coming up, they were going to turn to him. But Chris Stratton, he's got through 80 innings last year. He pitched in the playoffs last year. It's like he's some scrub that you just threw out there. I mean, yeah, he's going to pitch multiple innings sometimes this year, but I don't think that was an absolutely out-of-place spot for him. I mean, it was a 1-run game, big crowd. He's pitched in front of playoff crowds before. This was somebody that wasn't a bad pick. MacArthur and Will Smith and Schreiber, probably better, hindsight 2020, but they also could have struggled as well. I think it's fine that the Royals, they have this day off today, and you go back and you have a fully fresh bullpen again, and maybe Matt Quatraro will decide it a little bit differently next time they're in a spot like that. Next question comes from Charles. Can we compete if Singer has an ERA that is over 4? I believe it's what I always get the greater than and less than equal signs to. If Brady Singer, I'll put it this way. The Royals can compete if Brady Singer's ERA is sub 5 because he's the number 4 starter in the rotation. If his ERA is sub 5, I think that's good for Brady. I think that's a good mark for him. It's a good mark to set for him. So for me, I don't really see any sort of scenario unless he just pitches like he did last year. ERA's near 6, not getting many strikeouts, dealing with a lot of base runners, not working deep into games. That's the only way I think this Royals pitching staff and this coaching staff would have to make a change at the number 4 spot. Next question comes from Sean. Actually, that's another statement. Again, I get these all mixed up all the time. Cold takes us, why is Salvi still swinging a slider 5 feet off the plate? Seems like Salvi's the hot topic for all these questions today, but I do believe that this is who Salvador Perez is. There's also going to be times here that there's a slider 5 feet off the plate that he pokes out into right field for a 2-run double. Like, that's just the hitter that he is. He's a bad ball hitter. If you are surprised by that at this point, you just haven't been paying attention to Salvador Perez long enough. When he's going really well, he hits just about everything. It doesn't matter where you throw it, he's going to be able to hit it. On the contrary, when he struggles, it's really bad because he's swinging at himself, swinging a lot of bad pitches and not helping himself out. That, to me, is the hot and cold with Salvador Perez. But if you're asking the question why he's swinging at that, because he's done it his entire career. Next question we are going to go with is from Moyer. Curious to hear your opinion on the bullpen usage today. Questionable in my opinion. Stratton shouldn't have been there in the ninth. Yeah, I mean, that's just where we agree to disagree. Chris Stratton is not some scrub. Chris Stratton was a guy they brought in to be able to pitch in high leverage spots. Yes, he can go longer than some guys, but it was a one-run game. That's a pitcher with playoff experience. He was effective last year. He was good with St. Louis and Texas. He didn't deal with a lot of base runners, and Minnesota was just on him. They had, I think, 2 hits. He had a walk. He had a wild pitch that Salvador Perez thought hit a batter, and some soft contact there. I mean, it was not a great outing, but I think it was more so that he just didn't have a good feel for his pitches. It wasn't like he was just getting knocked all around the park. I would have gone to maybe John Schreiber in a spot like that, but you also paid Chris Stratton. So Chris Stratton is not like some of the bullpen pitchers you've seen in the past. They're paying money for him to be just fine in that spot, and I'm sure they're going to try him in another spot like that shortly in the next couple series. They need to see how valuable he can be in a 1-run or a 2-run game. Okay, we're going to move on to our final list of questions. Before we do that, want to give a shout out to Locked On Sports Today. Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're going to try to wrap it up as quick as we can with all the remaining questions in a Mailbag Friday. Next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. Give me that follow on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. And follow us on all the podcasting platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just hit that follow button and subscribe. Let's continue with our questions. The next one comes from Alex. Do you think there's a possibility the Royals start the season 0-6? Again, feels like a knee-jerk reaction to one loss to a really good team, but you do have 2 more games against that really good team and then 3 games against the best team in the American League in their own house and the Baltimore Orioles. Possible, yeah. I mean, those are 2 really good teams you're facing. Do I think it happens? No. I think the Royals, at worst, grab 1 more against Minnesota and 1 against Baltimore. Or maybe worst case would be getting swept in Baltimore. Maybe I should just lean into the question. The worst case would be 0-6. But I think the Royals have a team better equipped than starting 0-6. These are good challenges. These are good teams. I just don't want to have the knee-jerk reaction to 1 loss. 0-1 is 0-1. In the grand scheme of things, 0-1 is not a ton different than 1-0. The Royals are going to have, if they're good, somewhere between 75 and 80 more losses like this. Like, that's a lot of losses. And opening day, I get it holds a lot of weight, but we sometimes have to put it in the grand scope of things, and it's 1 game. It's 1 game in a 6-month-long season. Don't want to have the knee-jerk reaction of, is this team going to lose its first 6 games of the year? It could happen. Not going to say it's impossible. Nothing's impossible in baseball. I just don't envision it happening. Jason asks, if Velasquez starts off extremely poor, how long of a leash until he gets – how long of a leash will he get? End of April or May? I would say it also depends on what Nick Prado looks like. Right now, though, I think they'll at least give Nelson Velasquez the first 2 months. I mean, think about last year. It was an evaluation year, but guys like Michael Massey and MJ Melendez and Kyle Isbell really struggled. A knee-jerk reaction after 1 month or a couple weeks would just show how bad your decision was to pick him over Nick Prado. I think they want to see it through a little bit. I'm curious how guys like Nelson Velasquez bounce back tomorrow, bounce back on Sunday, bounce back against some lesser pitchers that aren't dark horses or maybe favorites at this point to win the Cy Young. But for the leash aspect, I'd imagine 2 months into the season if it is really bad. Or maybe it's the first month and he has a phantom IL stint and Nick Prado takes his place. But I don't want to speculate on any injuries after 1 game. Next question we got here comes from Devin. It's time to move on from Salvi. Overreaction Friday, I understand. However, the pitch selection he had was beyond bad. Even for him. For me, it is a sure bat and a better bat. Is it time? No, Devin, it is not time. Freddie Fermin is a good number 2 catcher. Salvador Perez is going to be just fine. Salvador Perez is still one of the most powerful hitters on this team, and the pitch selection is just a part of Salvador Perez. You could copy-paste this same answer for every single year of his career. We've all gone through spurts with this with Salvador Perez that when he struggles, when he slumps, it's like, how is he swinging at that? Because he's done it his entire career. And he's also made a very successful career out of being a bad ball hitter. It is not time to move on from Salvador Perez, and the Royals are not going to move on from Salvador Perez unless he's injured. And as long as he's healthy, he's going to be in that lineup pretty much every single day. Next question comes from, looks like this is Grant. Let's go Jerling. Let's go Jerling. We're going to say the Twitter name is here. Hey, man, question for Mailbag Friday. How comparable is opening day baseball to playoff baseball? Seems like all these games have juice. That's indicative of a team's season. It was definitely a playoff atmosphere yesterday. It just was more of a dud because the crowd couldn't really get into it after the first inning. But, yeah, it was absolutely a playoff atmosphere. I think that you do get even more juice for those that went to those playoff games in 14 and 15. It's pretty much buzzing pitch to pitch. Yesterday, it's usually buzzing early on, and then it's how the game goes. For playoff baseball, people are always believing. Innings 1 through 9. It doesn't matter how many runs you're down. There's a lot of juice and energy in the stadium. So it's very comparable. Yesterday was a lot of fun in terms of the atmosphere, but playoff baseball has a tick up in terms of enthusiasm and more of a chaotic atmosphere. But great question there. Next question we got here. Let's see. Oh, we actually only have like 5 left, so we might be able to get this in the time provided. This comes from Quad Cities River Hackett. From a strategy standpoint in division that might be tight until the very end, would starting Singer have gotten us more wins in our first 5 to 10 games, or do we need to try to put our best out there for the opener? You always put your best out there for opening day. This early in the season, you don't need to worry about, how do you look in the first 5 to 10 games. You want to win, but the Royals would have had no chance yesterday if Brady Singer was on opening day. No chance whatsoever. You wanted Cole Reagans to go head-to-head with their ace. That's what everybody's thought is, and you hope to be on the winning side of that. The Royals simply were not. But Cole Reagans hopefully will be this team's opening day starter for the next 5 to 6 years. And hopefully we see a lot more starts that look just like that. But Brady's going to go in that series, or in the series finale against Minnesota on Sunday. Seth Lugo will be tomorrow. No issue with the way the Royals handle that rotation. Then with Michael Wacha starting game 1 in Baltimore on Monday. This question comes from Kevin. Will the Royals win more than 68 games? My prediction yesterday was 80 and 82. One game is not going to change my opinion on that. And in fact, I got to stick with that. I may tell you honestly, the closer we get toward the end of the season, what it actually may be. But I got to stick with my prediction. I can't abandon it, and I'm certainly not going to abandon it after one game. KU Rules asks, when is Reagan's going to throw his best pitches? His slider is one of his best and best in the world, and he barely throws it. He's got 5 really good pitches. His fastball is great. His curveball is great. His changeup's great. His slider's great. His cutter's great. I just don't know how you can walk away thinking that his start wasn't that good yesterday. It was one of the most impressive starts of anybody in baseball. He set the Royals' opening day record for strikeouts with 9. If you're getting a lot of swingings and misses, I guess it doesn't matter what pitches you're throwing. I think I would have thrown a curveball or a cutter in on Royce Lewis and a fastball down the heart of the plate. And I'm sure Cole Reagans would think, yeah, I either need to locate that fastball better or throw a different pitch. And to Carlos Correa on the 2-run double, or the RBI double, it actually wasn't a 2-run double. For an RBI double, he wishes he would have thrown a different pitch. But I can't walk away from yesterday's start going, I wish Cole Reagans would have done a little bit more. He did his job. Quality start, 9 Ks, 2 runs. He gave his team, he gave his offense a chance to win that baseball game, and they didn't do it for him. That's the way this game goes against really good teams. Final 4 questions here. Ben asked, why is Fermin not the everyday catcher when he was better than Salvi in basically every metric last season? I did not expect this much of an outcry against Salvador Perez. Look, Freddie is a great defensive catcher, and at this point in his career, he's better defensively. I'm not going to go as far to say that Freddie Fermin is a better everyday catcher because he's never done it before. And if we're going to make that switch one game into the season, then I would be floored. But Freddie Fermin also could have that factor of being exposed. I mean, last year, when Salvi was down and Freddie started playing a lot every single day, he had like a 1 for 25 stretch. Young hitters are going to go through that. And he's not even really that much of a young hitter anymore. He's almost 30. So I like Freddie a lot. I really do. I think he's better defensively than Salvi. But I'm not willing to make that change when Salvador Perez is going to be the better offensive contributor in that lineup. Folks, an 0 for 4 day is not going to do that for me. If Salvi's hitting 120 by the end of the month or 150 in May, then maybe you can make that decision. But right now, the Royals are in no way, shape, or form thinking about moving Freddie Fermin to the everyday spot in the lineup. And Chance asked, would you rather take the odds of the Royals going 0-162 or 161-1? If I'm rolling the dice there, I'm probably going to go 161-1, just to be the optimist in a question like that. But thank you from Chance there, who I'm good buddies with. And lastly, Michael Garcia Fan Club asked, what was your first impression on the new guys today? I thought that of the new guys, Adam Frazier really didn't surprise me that much, but he didn't really disappoint me. Hunter Renfroe hit 2 balls hard. I wish he would launch the ball a little bit more, but also tough to do against a good arm. Bullpen-wise, not impressed with Chris Stratton. Was all right with Nick Anderson. I think that about does it with whoever I had there. So that is what I thought of the new guys, and we'll see what they look like in Game 2 of this series. Tomorrow, 3:10 first pitch, Seth Lugo versus Joe Ryan. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of a Mailbag Friday on Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Before we say goodbye, want to give one last shout-out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV Channels app. We're going to have full coverage on Monday of the 2 games that happen on Saturday and Sunday. Preview a little bit of that Baltimore series. Michael Walker will get his first start in Game 1, and plenty more Royals talk throughout next week. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.